I used to think that I had goals, and I thought I did fairly well at them. And then I read this book. Hi there friends, welcome back to the channel where we focus on self-improvement, productivity, and making the best possible versions of ourselves. The book we're going to be discussing today is Goals by Brian Tracy. I'm going to be covering 5 key principles to this book, but the main reason for making this video is to encourage you guys to read this book and ingest the knowledge that it offers. So I'll give you a brief overview of the book, kind of what you would expect when you will read it. The very beginning of the book, Brian pushes pretty strongly that the key to unlocking your abilities is by realizing that you have unlimited potential. And as you read this book, you'll find that this is a pretty common thread the whole way through. He explains how this is key to goal achievement and how to actually believe that it is possible. He really grounds the foundation in deep and emphasizes that what you think about most of the time is what you become. A little bit later, we get into the actual meat of the book. I found this part of the book very refreshing because he doesn't simply say do this and don't do this, but instead he gives you exercises to do. He walks you through the exercise and then gives you advice on what to do with the outcome of those exercises. He finishes out with some really great examples of how to live out those different practices and how to become the absolute best at whatever you are doing. Now, I think you would agree with me when I say that it would be kind of unwise for me to make an entire video on goals and not define what a goal is. So that's the very first point we're going to be covering. What defines a goal? Like me, you may be pretty optimistic about your view of what a goal is, and you may feel like you have a pretty good understanding of what that is. But according to Brian, goals fall into a very specific description. So let's cover the criteria that he gives us that a goal must fit in. Goals must be clear, specific, detailed, and written down. Goals must be measurable and objective, not something like make lots of money. Goals must be time-bound with schedules, deadlines, and sub-deadlines. Possibly one of the tastiest quotes in this whole book is there's no such thing as an unrealistic goal, only unrealistic timelines. Your goal must be challenging. It should stretch you, but not break you. Goals must be congruent with your values and in harmony with each other. Goals must be balanced. You must have a major, definite purpose for your life, which pretty much translates into having one specific goal that, if accomplished, will do more to help improve your life than any other single goal. And often when you're working towards that goal, you'll conveniently find that you'll actually accomplish and achieve other goals along the way. So now that we have a clear vision of what a goal is, it's time to define our main primary goal, or like Brian calls it, his major definite purpose. I really don't care what you call it. In his book, Brian gives the following exercise, and I would encourage you to follow along. First, get a piece of paper and write goals at the top of it. And then write at least 15 goals that you would like to accomplish within the next 12 months. And then ask yourself, which one of these goals, if accomplished, will bring about the most positive change to my life? Then read through your list and find the goal that answers that question. That goal then becomes your main primary goal, and all resources and energy should be thrown into accomplishing that goal. Towards the end of this part of the book, Brian gives some advice that I think is really valuable. He says, don't sabotage yourself. If you make a goal that is clearly unrealistic, millionaire in 1 year from nothing, for example, it will end up discouraging you, not motivating you. He then says, whatever your definite purpose is, ask only how, and from there, your success is based on how hard you're willing to work and how much time you're willing to put into it. He goes on to say, write down everything that you think you can accomplish for this goal and then take action on at least one thing on that list. Which is a lovely segue into the third part of this video, which is write your goals. Brian says that a goal that is not written is no goal at all. It is merely a wish. And I'll be the first to admit that I was pretty skeptical of this part of the book when I got to it, but when I began actually doing this and actually writing my goals, I promptly understood why he made such a bold statement. If you study high achievers, you'll find that they often have very clear, descriptive, written goals that are reviewed on a regular basis. So here's the thing, when you write your goals, something very interesting happens. The goal that you write then becomes lodged into your subconscious mind. And this is because handwriting is a direct connection to the subconscious mind. I'll kind of explain what it did for me. I've been writing my goal every single day for around a month and a half now. And what I've noticed is that over time, your subconscious kind of actually latches onto the idea and then just starts to run with it. And you'll find that your mind will begin working on that goal in the background 24/7 without your conscious mind even thinking about it. And it's really fascinating because your mind will then actually begin to like completely believe that this is 100% going to happen and that there is no way around it and that it is going to happen. And when your mind latches onto that, your actions and your habits, like everything changes to push yourself in the direction of that goal. It's like an underlying motivation that's just always there, just pushing you, pushing you, pushing you. The amount of motivation alone that it provides is astounding, and it very quickly changes your perspective of the world and your perspective of how you use the time that's been given to you. Your subconscious actually believes that it's already essentially taken place. So instead of if it's going to happen, it's now a question of when is it going to happen. So if you procrastinate and goof off, then instead of taking 2 years, it may take 5 years. So then whenever you're tired and you want to waste time, your mind is like, why would I do that? Because if I do that, then it's going to take me longer to get to my goal. It's like a driving force through everything that you do. Like things like that actually begin to lose their taste. At least they did for me, because I'm like, there's no point in me watching an hour and a half of Netflix, because if I do that, then it's gonna take me longer in the long run to get done with my goal, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, which is just so fascinating. I love the mind and how it works like that. And it's also pretty incredible that you have the ability to kind of harness that and use it with almost any goal that you want to push yourself in the direction of. Another essential part that writing your goals does, besides that, is that it gives you a very clear view of where you're going. And it not only clears up your view of the end goal, but it also illuminates the path to getting there. I'm a firm believer in that you cannot hit a target that you can't see. So clearly defining your goal is like clearing away all the brush so that you can see the target you're aiming at. Now there's another part to this whole writing your goals, because if you want the benefits of what I explained earlier, then you need to write your goals correctly. So the second part of writing your goals that we're going to cover is how to write your goals so that your subconscious will take hold of them and begin pushing you in that direction. So first and foremost, obviously they need to fall within the categories of what a goal must be, like I explained earlier. And then your goals need to be written and described with the 3P formula, which is writing your goals with positive, present, and personal tenses. Now, let's investigate why Brian says that we need to write our goals this way. Here's what he says about each individual tense. So the present tense, he says, your subconscious mind is activated only by affirming statements that are in the present tense. So instead of saying, I will earn X amount of money by this time, you say, I earn this much money, as if you're already there. Positive tense. Our subconscious is more receptive to positive commands, such as I am a non-smoker or I weigh X number of pounds. And the third part is the personal tense. And Brian says that from now on, you must write your goals beginning with I and followed by a verb of some kind, such as the examples I gave above. And the third part of writing your goals is how often you should write them. But if we want the full benefit of this, then I would recommend writing your major primary goal or your top 5 goals at least once a day, usually in the morning. And if you can't do that, then at least reviewing them every single day. Brian says that this helps to activate your reticular cortex, which is the next part of this video that we're going to be talking about. But before we get there, I just want to say really quickly, like a large part of writing out your goals and putting a little bit of effort into this is also determining how important your goal is to you. If you don't have the willpower to take 2 minutes every day to write your goal, then there's a good chance that you don't actually want to accomplish it that bad. Hundreds of thousands of people have done this throughout Brian's workshops for years and years, and they can all attest to its benefits, so I can assure you that it works. Part number 4 of this video, activate your reticular cortex. When you send a goal to your reticular cortex, it starts to make you intensely aware of all the people, information, or opportunities in your environment that will help you achieve your goal. An example of this is whenever you begin, say, a new occupation, and you suddenly notice the results of that occupation all over the place. Like when I started delivering mini barns, I noticed mini barns everywhere. If you buy a Jeep, you suddenly notice all the Jeeps everywhere. Let me give you a more real life example of one of my really, really good friends who's getting into real estate, and he's wanting to get a large number of rental houses in the next 5 years. But he's been thinking about it and pushing hard on this goal, and that's what he's focusing on all the time. He was on a flight and he noticed that the guy next to him was reading something on like real estate. So he talks to the guy about real estate real quick. Turns out that this guy is like a multi-millionaire with real estate and is like a consultant for a lot of people. And basically they just hit it off right away, and my friend got his number and he's still in contact with him like to this day. And whenever he has a question, calls him up, is like, hey, like I just couldn't figure this out. And the guy helps him and talks to him and takes time with him. So that's an example of when you're intensely focused on something, you begin to notice opportunities like that. If my friend hadn't been so intensely aware of all of the information surrounding that, there's a good chance he would never have noticed what the guy was even reading. It's really fascinating how that part of your mind works and how you can really get farther ahead simply by noticing things, because your mind is so intensely aware of what your goal is. When you decide on your major definite purpose, you increase the level of sensitivity in your environment to anything that can help you achieve that goal. This will happen naturally as you begin to throw yourself into achieving that goal. But another part of writing it, as we discussed earlier, is that it also helps to activate this part of your mind. Because if you take every morning to reinforce what your goal is and make sure that it's a clear vision in your mind's eye, you'll go throughout your day focusing on that particular part of your goal, making your attention to such things more and more aware. Now, before I give you the last part of this video, I want to quickly remind you guys that a video like this takes around 10 to 15 hours to produce. So I really want to thank you for supporting my goal of becoming a full-time YouTuber, whether that's through a like or a comment or subscribing, or if it's just a view on this video. It really goes a long ways and it really means a lot. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into part number 5 of this video. Make a plan of action. Brian has an entire chapter dedicated to this topic. He begins the chapter with a quote that says, "Failing to plan is planning to fail." While engaged in the planning process, he says that your biggest concern should be identifying every step necessary and the exact amount of time it will take to accomplish that step. Every plan and process at some point will go through a bottleneck that will slow the entire process down. So one of the key parts of planning is identifying where those bottlenecks are going to be and how to eliminate them. Another thing that Brian says that really resonated with me is that if you lack clear vision and concentration, you'll essentially end up spreading yourself over a really wide area and accomplishing very little. The good thing about planning is that it's a skill that you can develop over time. The very act of planning improves and streamlines the process of goal achievement. There was a really interesting study that is covered in the book where they went and studied multiple hundreds of small businesses as they started, and they classified them as the ones that either made a plan when they first were beginning and the ones that did not. And then they pretty much left them and came back a number of years later. What they found was that the businesses that started with a plan were, for the most part, doing very well for themselves, and the ones that did not have a plan when they first started were completely floundering. And possibly the most interesting part about this whole thing is that they found that the ones that made the plan pretty much like made the plan at the beginning and then stuck it in a drawer and forgot about it. The simple act of planning was enough to dramatically set them apart, which I just find so fascinating. A few notes about this book whenever you go to read it. It gets a little bit redundant after a while. So when you read this book, don't feel bad if you end up skipping through whole chapters or breezing over some of the examples, because it does repeat itself after a little while. I did leave a link down in the description to Goodreads, where you can also read other people's review of this book and get some more insight, and that way you don't have to only take my opinion on it. You can also buy the book down there. I left a link for you if you'd like to do that as well. I really enjoyed how the book did not necessarily only give you pointers, but it also gave you exercises that help you form your own vision of where you want to go and what your goals will be. Now, there's a good chance that while you were listening to this video, you thought of someone else that could benefit from hearing these different processes. If you did, I would really encourage you to send them this video. Now, if they decide to disregard it and they don't have any interest in it, that's totally on them and it's not on you. But it's worse if they never have the opportunity to hear. So with that being said, gentlemen, as always, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next video.